Okay, so a warm welcome everyone from my side, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining us today. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 5th webinar of our NDC4 webinar series. My name is Maja and I work as an advisor for GIZ Proklima in the C42 project. Today, I will be your facilitator and guide you through this event. Let me start with a few introductory words about this event. Today's webinar is part of the NDC4 webinar series, which aims to illustrate tools, methods, and best practice examples for designing and implementing more ambitious NDCs in the cooling sector. The NDC4 webinar series is provided by the project Cool Contributions Fighting Climate Change 2, and it's part of the International Climate Initiative and financed by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection. And before we go into more detail, please let me explain some more technical information. I kindly ask you to please stay muted during the session and turn off your camera. If you have any questions, please write them down in the chat and we will have a Q&A session in the end. Please be aware that this event is being recorded and will be published on our website afterwards, but only the slides and the audio will be published, so neither the chat nor the videos. Today, I'm supported by my colleague Amelie. Please contact her in case you have any questions or technical problems, and you can find her email address in the chat. And yeah, it would be great to get to know a bit who is here and test if the chat is working. So yeah, feel free to write in the chat from where you are joining today. Okay. But looking at the time, I would say we will just see the answers in the chat. I see Germany, okay. And then already go ahead to the next slide and have a look at the agenda for today. Wow, Berlin, Australia, Switzerland. Hi, South Africa. Nice that you're here. Okay, we're happy to have you all here and organize this virtual event with financial experts to discuss possible opportunities for financial institutions to set up or improve financing mechanisms for green cooling technologies. We will first hear the welcome remarks of Franziska Schmidtner, who's the project manager of the C42 project. After that, we will hear from Lukas Kahlen from the NewClimate Institute, who will give us an overview on financing mitigation measures in the cooling sector. He will then also go on to talk about financing green cooling and highlight the possible roles, opportunities, and risks for financial institutions. After that, Sanna Stockstrom from the KfW Development Bank will tell us more about using credit lines to foster green lending in the cooling sector. And last but not least, we will then have a possibility for an open discussion, a Q&A session with all participants. And for the Q&A session, please post your questions throughout the webinar in the chat, and we will then collect all questions and pose them to our speakers at the end of the event. Let me now give the floor to my colleague Franziska Schmidtner. She is the project manager of C42, and she's overseeing the Latin America and Caribbean portfolio at GIZ Proklima.
Thank you very much, Maja, and welcome to the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to have you here. And we hope that you are, as we are, interested in how we can really facilitate financing opportunities for the green cooling sector. As you may know, cooling technologies are needed everywhere and every day. In everyday life, we are depending on refrigeration and air conditioning, even if we are not really aware of it. The cooling sector will continue to grow for decades to come, especially in the global south, because of various reasons, such as economic growth, urbanization, and also rising temperatures due to climate change. According to a recent study from the International Energy Agency, cooling accounts already today for 20% of global electricity consumption. Especially for this sector, already alternative technologies are available, but not broadly used in the global south. So we intend to, to contribute to a change and to a transformation of this sector. UNEP states that coordinated international action on sustainable cooling can save 78 billion tons CO2 between now and 2050. It can improve the lives of hundreds of millions and realize huge financial savings. As you may know, the Montreal Protocol and its multilateral fund has provided successfully and very comprehensive funding for technology transformation of the cooling sector and will continue to do so with its Kigali Amendment. This is related to the phase down of emissions from especially climate damaging refrigerants, the so-called HFCs. You will hear some more technical details later. Our experience, nevertheless, has shown that our partner countries need additional funding and financing opportunities of projects. This is also shown and proven by initiatives as the planned Global Cooling Pledge to be announced at the next COP. Against this background, we would like to raise awareness in the financial community on the importance of this sector and also on its business opportunities for banks. And we would like to promote the most sustainable technology options based on natural refrigerants. We see the need to first reduce the need for cooling by passive cooling, energy efficient buildings, the optimization of the use of shadows, etc. But we know also that new technologies are required and that even in countries like China, India, Indonesia, people have not yet purchased their first AC and they will do so. So we would like to promote the best available technologies. I wish us a very successful webinar and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much for being here and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Franziska. Now I would like to hand over already to our first speaker, Lukas Kahlen from the NewClimate Institute. Lukas will now talk about financing green cooling and specifically highlight the possible roles, opportunities, and risks for financial institutions. Just a few introductory words. In his work, Lukas focuses on climate finance and sustainable development related topics. He has over 10 years of experience in climate and development cooperation, and he currently specializes on the provision of climate policy advice on financing mitigation strategies related to renewable energy and energy efficiency, both to public and private stakeholders in a range of sectors, including the refrigeration and air conditioning sector. So now, Lukas, to you, please unmute yourself, take over control, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Maja, and thank you for having me on this webinar. I'm very excited to speak about financing mitigation measures in the cooling sector, and later about the roles and opportunities, but also the challenges for financial institutions. So starting with an overview and asking the very general question of why are we actually talking about green cooling? I think Franziska already gave the answer, but I wanted to just highlight again that cooling is a very important part of our everyday life. And apart from cooling rooms and workplaces, we also need it for cold chains for fresh food, but also to store vaccines and medicine safely. But this, as a consequence, also leads to the fact that the so-called RAC, so refrigeration and air conditioning sector, is a massive contributor to climate change. So essentially, we are talking about green cooling because if we manage to provide climate-friendly and energy-efficient cooling solutions, we can, on one hand, protect the climate, but also contribute to people's well-being globally. But this is not an easy task, and here we often refer to the so-called vicious cycle of green cooling, and the impacts we already see today. So I think we all witnessed a global temperature increase already now. So we have every year new records in terms of temperature, and this in turn leads to an increased demand for cooling equipment. So we have seen that the energy consumption for space cooling has more than tripled since 1990, and in 2021, space cooling has experienced the highest annual growth among all building and use areas. And this leads to the fact that, the RAC sector already now contributes an important share to overall global emissions, and will do so even more in the future, given this vicious cycle. And we see that already now 1.2 billion people are actually already at high risk when it comes to their lives related to heat threats. This is an issue we need to face. Before we talk about how we face it, I just wanted to give you a quick insight in terms of the different emissions from the RAC sector. So globally speaking, we estimate that 2/3 of all RAC sector emissions are so-called indirect emissions, so that relate to the energy consumptions of cooling appliances, and 1/3 are so-called direct emissions that arise when refrigerants are released. So that is a global estimate, but of course this depends on the country context. So for instance, if the electricity mix is already quite green, then it's likely that indirect emissions play play a minor role, or at least not represent 2/3. So this is more global estimate. Talking about potential solutions and mitigation actions in space cooling in buildings, here we show what we can do. So in dark red, we see what we can do in terms of mitigating indirect emissions. So we can enhance the appliance efficiency. We can reduce carbon intensity of the energy supply, and also reduce the cooling load through, for instance, improved insulation, shading, etc. On the direct emission side, we can transition to low global warming potential refrigerants or natural refrigerants. We can reduce the leakages through proper installation and servicing. And last but not least, we can also engage in proper recovery, recycle, and destruction of refrigerants. So these are areas where we can engage to mitigate some of the emissions we have just seen. So summarizing all of this, we talk about the principles of green cooling, and saying that basically we need to engage in all of these three areas together to be able to transition to a low carbon cooling future. So we need to improve the building envelope, increase energy efficiency of appliances, and switch to low GWP refrigerants. And always having in mind that we need to source electricity increasingly from renewable energy sources. So what can politicians or policymakers do about it? So we have listed a couple of activities for each of these intervention areas. So in terms of upgrading the building envelope, we can work with mandatory building codes. We can engage in renovating existing buildings. When it comes to increasing the energy efficiency of RAC appliances, an important tool would be working with minimum energy performance standards or voluntary labels of RAC appliances. The third area, in terms of switching to low GWP refrigerants, here we can think about certain refrigerant standards or regulations. For instance, an early phase out of HFC, or a ban of high GWP refrigerants. And then there are a range of cross-cutting measures that are important that link to communication or awareness raising, for instance, but also to capacity development. I think that's an important part when transitioning to natural refrigerants, to train RAC technicians in handling those refrigerants. But then there's also a range of support policies, including, for instance, green public procurement, but also a wide range of financial support schemes. And this is, the topic of today. I want to explain this a bit more in detail. So if we talk about financing low carbon development in the RAC sector, what does it actually entail? And it does entail the need for capital investments across the entire value chain of the RAC sector. So starting with R&D, but also covering manufacturing, distribution, and deployment of low carbon cooling technologies. So essentially, finance is needed both on the supply and the demand side of the sector and across a wide range of industries and end use areas. So essentially, there are two aspects we need to consider here. One is financing direct emission reductions. And this is covered, or at least supported by the multilateral fund, which Franziska already mentioned. And then when thinking about financing indirect emission reductions, the picture is a little bit more complex. So we have different sources of funding, but these are a little bit more scattered and usually do not target the RUC sector in particular, but more broadly focusing on energy efficiency measures. So this is a challenge, but there are also more barriers to financing low carbon development in the RUC sector. And we group them into 5 categories, starting with the regulatory and policy barriers. Those relate to a lack of stringent policy framework, and also which in the end results in a negative investment environment in that sector. We have institutional barriers when thinking about a lack of coordination between key institutions that are active in that field, but also within these institutions, we see there might be a lack of capacities and skills on the topic of green cooling. And related to this, we also have informational barriers with a lack of knowledge and data on mitigation options in the sector, and also potentially a lack of awareness when it comes to these technologies and their benefits. And then we have one barrier that is actually cited as key, which is the lack of access to capital markets and commercial finance. Also, the fact that we are confronted with higher transaction costs due to smaller project sizes and potentially higher upfront investment costs. And there's also a risk of a risk perception of new and innovative technologies. And then we also have more structural barriers, so linked to technology and the market. And this can be as explicit as the split incentive in the building sector, so where the tenants that usually pay the energy bill are not those that take investment decisions, which are usually done by the building owners. And then there's a crucial issue of the availability of technology in certain markets. So these are some of the barriers, and let's say the introduction to the topic. I wanted to continue right away with potential roles and opportunities and risks for financial institutions. So here, before we look more in depth into green loans, which is the focus of today, I wanted to still show you the different green initiatives that financial institutions can engage in. So we have the area of environmental policy, so where a bank or financial institution can mention these issues in their mission, vision, or values. There could be an officer assigned to handling these issues internally. So that's one area. Then we have the area of dealing with the internal ecological footprint of a bank. So for this, it would be important to do a carbon audit, let's say, set targets for reducing their own ecological footprint, and then do measures in reducing it, and then do regular reporting. Then there's also the environmental risk assessment that banks can do on the client level. This could include, for instance, an exclusion list where especially harmful activities are not financed. And then we have the green loans, so basically providing credit schemes to finance renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies. And we also have green non-financial services, so engaging in raising awareness among clients and training them in some of these issues related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. So in summary, why are banks important here? And I think this relates to 2 important barriers I mentioned before. So on one hand, we see that state-of-the-art technology tends to have higher upfront investment costs when compared to conventional technologies. And we see that there's an insufficient access to finance. So here, essentially, the banks come in by providing adequate financial solutions to be able to increase the share of the population that can have access to these technologies by then overcoming this hurdle. But then also another point is, I think, very important. We have seen as a barrier that there's insufficient awareness about the benefits of these technologies. And I think here banks do have a role to play because they engage with their customers and have a close collaboration and exchange with them. So here the role could be to engage in raising awareness, doing capacity buildings through loan officers, engaging in marketing campaigns, etc. So that's, I think, that the two important elements that banks can engage in, and where they are important to overcome some of the barriers we have just seen. And with this slide, I wanted to briefly give you the background to the rationale of why we think about green loan schemes in the context of green cooling. I have to admit it's a very simplistic way to show it, but the idea here was to show the trade-off between, on one hand, financing conventional technologies. So this would be everything marked in white, where conventional technologies tend to have lower purchase cost, but then higher operating and maintenance as well as disposal costs. And then opposed to this, we would have state-of-the-art technology that tend to have a bit higher purchase costs, which makes it important for certain parts of the population to have credit schemes to overcome these higher upfront investment costs. But then throughout the life cycle, there are lower operating and maintenance costs as well as lower disposal costs. So in theory, there's also an energy saving that has been created at the client level, which increases the credit worthiness of clients. So here, the essential message is it's important to look at the life cycle costs of climate-friendly and energy efficiency cooling appliances, and not only at the purchase cost. And then I think if we successfully install green cooling schemes for green finance schemes for green cooling, what we can achieve is an increased penetration of these technologies in the market. Again, a very simplistic way to show it, but there is a certain part of the population that is able to acquire these technologies on a cash basis. But then there's also a large share of the population, especially in developing countries, that is in need for either a short or a long-term financing scheme to get ownership of these technologies. No? And this is here where the banks would come in. So summarizing the opportunities for financial institutions in that field, I would highlight 4 points. So the first is the market. We have seen it's already quite substantial, but it offers a significant growth potential in the future. The second point would be related to policies. So we have seen that there are national policies, for instance, when referring to the minimum energy performance standards, but also international commitments, as Franziska mentioned at the beginning, related to the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment, which all encourage an uptake of green cooling in the next years. So this gives a bit of a certainty to banks to engage in that area. The third point would be that this allows for a diversification of the service and loan portfolio of banks. And this can even happen at a relatively low risk, as we have seen now. If one finances a certain technology that leads to energy savings, there's an increase in the capacity to repay the loan on the client side. And the fourth point would be to become a front runner. So we could get competitive advantages over peer institutions in that field, but we can also attract additional funding from international funds or financial institutions that concentrate on more sustainable issues. And we can embed this activity in the sustainable finance agenda. And for those of you who are not familiar with this term, I wanted to briefly summarize this here on that slide. So it's essentially an emerging approach in the finance sector, and it supports economic growth, but in a clean, resilient, and sustainable manner. No? And it does so across multiple purposes. So it looks at economic development, of course, but also considers social inclusion and environmental sustainability. And it actually can encompass a wide range of finance schemes or entities, from banks, microfinance institutions, etc. No? And when looking at instruments and products, they all relate to climate change, of course, in that case. But yeah, I can focus on mitigation or adaptation, financing renewable energy, but also energy efficiency products, and so on. So that's a bit the idea behind this sustainable finance agenda. And I wanted to also say something about the stakeholder overview. We normally have the relation between the commercial bank and its customer. But here in this case, if we finance hardware or in this case, green cooling technology, there would be a third actor in that scheme, which are the manufacturers or the distributors of these technologies. And there are different ways to make this triangle work. We can discuss it also potentially later. But just to say that there are additional actors in that scheme that are of relevance. And then we have international climate funds, MDBs, or second-tier banks that can provide credit lines to commercial banks. We have KfW also in the webinar, and we'll for sure learn more about this in a minute. And let me conclude with this slide. I've talked about barriers before, but these are some barriers explicitly for commercial banks when engaging in green cooling. I won't repeat all of it. It has to do with a lack of knowledge, awareness, potentially also with a lack of support from management or resistance to change, to expand the portfolio. But then there's one barrier, the financial barrier, where we have seen that commercial banks lack at least the overview of potential sources for funding, or preferential credit lines, let's say, to be able to offer an attractive product to their clients. And the second point here would also be that the price range of the products of green cooling technologies might not fit the average credit size of a bank. So I think these are barriers, particularly for commercial banks. And I think it's a good occasion now to hand over to Sanna to talk about the support from an institution like KfW to commercial banks in that field. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lukas, for this very interesting presentation. Maja, I saw you. Do you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lukas, first for this wonderful presentation and this very, very comprehensive overview. That was really, really good. And yeah, now I'm very happy to give the stage to our second speaker, Sanna Stockstrom from the KfW Development Bank. Sanna is working for more than 10 years in financial cooperation, and since 2022, she's part of the financial sector team working on financial systems development and green finance as senior sector economist climate finance. She is in charge, amongst others, on conducting trainings for KfW staff in climate finance. And yeah, Sanna, we are very happy to have you here and to listen to you and learn more about how to make use of credit lines to foster green lending in the cooling sector. Let me just share your presentation and then you can almost go ahead. Okay, now everybody should be able to see your presentation. Please unmute yourself and then the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll try to click through the presentation myself. I think it should work by now. Hi to everybody, and thanks again to Lukas for his very interesting and insightful presentation. I'd like to share today what we are doing within KfW Development Bank to support green cooling. So basically, I want to embrace two topics. Number one, why are we refinancing green credit lines? Why is this an important topic to us? And we believe it should also be an important one to our partner banks. And then the experiences we have to date in engaging with refinancing green credit lines. So why should you do that in the first place? Now, Lukas has hinted to a number of very important reasons, but I try and look at it from the perspective as a bank. Our key motivation is that we want to be a climate neutral bank in our portfolio, the latest by 2050. And we have chosen the 1.5 global warming path to do so, which means that we have a number of sector policies right now to steer and govern our overall lending activities, which is also why for us green finance or refinancing green financial products is absolutely key. And it is one of our major ambitions to support the establishment of new technologies and green technologies in local markets. So we do that by providing attractive financial conditions to our partner banks, allowing them to pass on these promotional conditions to their final clients. Our key impact should therefore be at the end of the final borrower. We wish the client of our local partner bank to benefit from our promotional lending conditions. And by that, we hope to reduce the cost of the new technology to be introduced in the new market. And of course, the overall ambition is to support nationally determined contributions and to support economies on their path to Paris alignment and to reduce the carbon footprint of economies and also to reduce other harmful greenhouse gas emissions. So partner banks always ask us what is in for us. We realize that partner banks have different experiences with green finance so far. In some regions, in some countries, we have partner banks who already have very strong positions and experiences in green finance, and others just are about to start their journey to consider green products. So when we enter a discussion, we very often find that we need to discuss with some of them or convince them why it is a good idea to engage in green finance at all. And I have here a number of arguments which I believe are strongest if you ever should be discussing with a financial intermediary why to engage in green finance. And the first one is that we strongly believe that the business model of a bank can be improved and strengthened if you go for green finance. The future is green. I think there's no doubt about that. And the role of the financial sector is a very strong role in reaching overarching climate goals. And we believe that financial institutions who do not embark on this green path will be left behind, and that their business models will be looked upon increasingly negatively. And this will then have two negative effects. Number one is it has something to do with marketing. The brand of a bank, which is green, is a stronger brand. It is increasingly more positively recognized by customers than banks which refuse to go down the green path. So being a first mover will be gratified by local markets and by final customers and borrowers who are also looking increasingly for green financial products. But then there's a business argument to that as well. We find that increasingly also refinancing agents or financial markets as well start looking at business model and start assessing whether these are green or not. And rating agencies also are increasingly considering this aspect, and risks are being assessed differently now. So a portfolio that is not green is now increasingly being considered as a riskier portfolio, and with certain assets, high climate risks are being associated. So we support partner banks in assessing their portfolio against climate risks. And many are then surprised to find out that having not a green portfolio or having risky assets in their portfolio ultimately also leads to poorer ratings and thus to more costly refinancing opportunities in the markets. And of course, it is in the utmost interest of treasurers to assure the best refinancing conditions they can have for their own lending opportunities. So occupying a new market niche with future growth opportunities in the green segment is good for a number of reasons. And we also believe that there is a business in it. I mean, all these different green financial products we are supporting throughout the world with different partner banks have helped partner banks to actually earn money and get a profit from that. There are still some people, but I do acknowledge that as we go down and experiences grow with green financing, who believe that no money can be made with green financial products. But I believe the opposite is true, and we have now gathered many years of experience that with sustainable business models, you can also make sustainable earnings. And this is also true for the financial market. So why are we interested now in green cooling? Green cooling or credit lines of financial products aiming at supporting green cooling, in our view, is a bankable product. And this is a very important thing to state, because there are some things it is easier to get a grip on for the financial markets and others that are more difficult. But with the support of Franziska, we have been able to define a whitelist of green cooling technologies we feel are worthwhile supporting in global markets. And we have also extended our blacklist and have listed their harmful substances from conventional cooling devices and approaches. So you can go both ways. You can go down the blacklist way and you can go down the whitelist way. So what we find particularly interesting in supporting now green cooling is that we believe that this whitelist approach nicely fits into our green building portfolio. It suits banking processes. There's no complex technical verification required as opposed to buildings. Once you have a clearly defined whitelist and there's clarity on the types of technologies you believe are fit for financing, any banking clerk can easily check a credit loan against the whitelist and can state whether the technology chosen is fit for financing or not. It can be combined with a green building product. Financing green buildings is more complex, as buildings are complex things to look at. But we are also considering supporting both things, for instance, with the same bank, because we many times find where in those cases where we finance the construction of new buildings, that new buildings are being sold or provided without cooling devices. But many times in many regions, the cooling device would be the first things the new owners would purchase. So it would be very smart then as a complementary offer to offer them also a financial product aimed at the air conditioning. What we find also very interesting is that you can have an outreach to many types of buildings with cooling needs. When you finance green buildings, you very often have to go for a segment of buildings only. For instance, only private buildings for home owners, or if you have a financial partner who works with different industries, you may have a grip on industrial buildings or hotels. The nice thing is, as you're only aiming at one specific technology needed in a building, that you could define the promotional criteria of the credit line in such a way that you are saying you are supporting or financing the installation or the exchange of an air conditioner regardless of the type of building. And this, I think, is extremely good in terms of impact. I mean, as Lukas has pointed out and Franziska has pointed out, cooling needs are on the rise in all types of buildings. So it would be extremely good to also target all of them. What we also find interesting, and this goes hand in hand, that you have outreach to many types of building, is that you also have outreach to a broad range of clients. As I said, you could look into private homes and have families as clients in the end of the day. So you could go into supermarkets, hotels, industrial production halls. It all would then depend on the range of customers the local financial intermediary is able to reach out to. So there are a number of opportunities in that. What we are mindful about is disposal. When you are financing the new installation of a green cooling equipment, you might at first think that disposal at this stage is not really an issue. But many times people may also like to exchange an old air conditioner against a new one. And then the question is, what happens with all the old devices if you are financing the installation of a new one? And of course, you may like to assure that there's a proper collection of devices, disposal and recycling of that, as we all know, many harmful substances are in these devices. And I think we must ensure that there's proper disposal of all of these, so that we can really be assured that we go for a positive impact of our credit lines and not negative impacts. Now, then the question arises, when actually refinancing a bankable product such as a green cooling advice is actually appropriate. You know, as a bank, you have to consider different financial instruments. I can support partner banks through providing them refinancing, but in theory, you could also support them, for instance, by providing a guarantee on a credit portfolio. Now, here are some arguments for refinancing. We found that refinancing is a good approach when new technologies are introduced in the market, and cost very often at the beginning, particularly if it's a very new product, is a key impediment. So you can support demand by refinancing a credit line on green cooling. And what we then found out in many similar project approaches is if you have demand, supply chains very easily start building up. And markets, if you want, are being formed and created. And after a number of years, the promotional credit line in that sense is not necessary anymore, as the product you have supported to be introduced in the market has become a conventional product which is easily available everywhere. And this is exactly what you're aiming for. What is very key in this approach is that the promotional refinancing conditions we as a donor, as a lender provide are passed on to final borrowers. So in our contract negotiations, the negotiation of on-lending conditions is generally one of the toughest because, of course, you want to ensure that the interest rate of the final financial product of the loan to those who want to purchase a modern green cooling device is a promotional interest rate and not a commercial interest rate. And finally, liquidity must be a key to the partner bank to launch a green financial product. Sometimes liquidity is not the issue to partner banks, but they might rather have de-risking needs, where you might think on guarantees, for instance. But if they are looking for refinancing to launch a new financial product, then it is time for us to come together and discuss the details then of such a project approach. So the experiences to date, just very briefly, are currently, if you want, around 4 sectors: in energy, in green buildings, transport, and agriculture. And the new financial product on green cooling, we're locating between energy and energy efficiency, and also, as I said, a supplementary to our green building programs. So here you have a rough overview on how different sectors. The energy sector is the strongest in our green credit lines, but also transport is increasingly on the rise. In terms of regions, and unsurprisingly, we are strongest with open credit lines in Latin America and Asia. This has something to do with the experience of our partner banks in launching green financial products. And in other regions, the experiences are not as strong as yet. We have different project types, so we target different types of final customers. We also have different volumes of individual loans. I would expect that a project approach around green cooling advices probably would be in the micro credit line. If maybe more complex coolings are required and complex in industrial processes or industries, you may probably go for larger tickets, but generally I think you would aim for lower ticket sizes. And finally, this is just to give you a hint on one of the projects we have refinanced for a long time, which is the EcoCasa program in Mexico, where we have actually thought through, this is one of the project examples where we have thought through whether a housing program could be complemented by a green cooling product. And now I think I will just end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanna, for this very comprehensive presentation. That was really actually very interesting, and I'm very happy to see and learn more about the KfW approach to support green cooling technologies. And it's particularly interesting to hear directly from a financial actor like you on the perspective and the potentials of financing green cooling. Now, from our speakers to our dear audience, let's start with the Q&A session now. If you have a question, please feel free to post them in the chat. I already saw some questions. So there is, for instance, the first question to Lukas. Do you have examples of effective green loan schemes in Article 5 countries? We have found it challenging to engage second-tier banks for capital investments which are less than $50,000 US.
Yeah, maybe it's a question to both of us, answering the first part of the question. So successful examples. I mean, there are a range of examples in Article 5 countries when it comes to microfinancing or financing renewable energy and energy efficiency. But I think the examples where this has a focus on cooling is is limited indeed. I think this has to do with the availability of technologies in these countries. So that's a precondition for a bank to engage, now that the supply is available and mature. And has proven that it works. So yeah, examples in the green cooling niche are, I guess, limited, but there are a range of examples when it comes to finance institutions offering green loans for energy efficiency and renewable energy more general. And maybe passing it on to Sanna for the second part of the question in terms of why yeah, it's challenging to access second-tier banks support.
I think this very much depends on the local context. This is my experience. As KfW Development Bank, we need to engage with public banks. We have no mandate to engage directly with private actors or with commercial banks. So we always go through promotional banks, national promotional banks. And then it very much depends on their business model, i.e. with whom are they actually engaging in their bank. Many of those national promotional banks have an apex structure. So they would have a network of commercial banks or microcredit intermediaries they would be working with as a distributional network for their lending activities. And so this varies according to their own structures. And I think with promotional banks, we have had so far, well, it depends on the context, but as I said, in Latin America and Asia, rather good and fruitful discussions on introducing green financial products. And as far as I can see, there is little reluctance vis-a-vis cooling. I remember, for instance, that a cash cow of Bancoldex in Mexico was actually an ecocredito and a green credit line on exchanging household appliances. So I think some or many banks see already the need or also the interest of final customers to go for efficient appliances. And I think you could make a similar case for green cooling as well. So I'm not so sure at which specific experience or country context this comment is alluding to.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, and I hope this answered the question. I saw another question, which was, does this whitelist for green cooling already exist? Is it publicly available? Does it already include substances and technologies? Yeah, let me just answer this directly. The whitelist is currently only an internal document, and GIZ Proklima is working on a publication to actually publish this, but interested banks can already contact us for advice on green cooling technology choices via our email address ndc4@giz.de. So I see a lot of other questions. Actually, I would take two questions together. They refer to the building sector and the hotel sector. Are there plans on making green cooling a mandatory part of green building financial projects, for instance? And also, whether there are any plans or already projects with the hotel sector, whether there have been any requests. Lukas, Sanna, I don't know who of you would like to start.
Well, I know that there is one project idea which is currently being developed. So the assignment of the project contract is still pending. And this is in Mexico, and that hits actually the hotel sector with green cooling. So that is in development. And in our green building projects, actually, cooling is an inherent component of our green building concept as well. But as I said, mostly in our experience, particularly if we refinance the construction of new buildings. These new flats or apartments or houses that have been built would be sold without appliances, because that makes them cheaper. And the market segments we are refinancing, we are usually going for the lowest income strata. So that's why quite simple finishings are being sold to new homeowners. But our experience is, and this goes over years, as soon as people have some money, so the next thing they would purchase in hot climate areas is an air conditioning, which is why we have been thinking through now that this combined package would be a good thing, that you have a product for those who want to purchase a new home that would be without anything. In many cases, when we make our project visits, we see cables coming out of the wall. So people know, okay, this is then the future place for my aircon. And then as a complementary module for homeowners who after a number of years have saved some money to purchase this hopefully green appliance. In my view, this makes sense. And this is the discussion we have with our operational teams in this.
Thank you very much, Sanna. Okay, I think we already have time only for one more question. This goes to you, Lukas. So the question is, some of the financing barriers sound very familiar from decades of microfinance, SME finance agendas. Are lease to own or like cooling as a service, pay-per-use business models explored or even in place in some countries?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And indeed, I think the discussion around microfinance and SME finance is it's happening for quite some decades now, and there are more innovative products, and I think some of them have been mentioned in the question itself. So cooling as a service, for instance, pay as you go, on bill or on wage financing. So the list is quite long, and some of them have been tested. There has been the meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol taking place last week, where a couple of these innovative instruments have been presented, and cases, for instance, in Africa, shown where this has worked. So there are examples of these more innovative finance mechanisms in place. But I think generally speaking, it depends on what we want to target. And I think if we want to target the hurdle in terms of the upfront investment costs, we still need to consider the traditional credit or loan mechanism as one. But yeah, this can be complemented by some of the more innovative instruments, as has been mentioned in the question itself.
Okay, thank you very much, Lukas and Sanna. When I look at the clock, I'm now closing the Q&A session. Thank you very much for your questions and all the answers. And before we are now closing today's session, I want to invite everyone who is not part of the Green Cooling Network and the Climate Ozone Protection Alliance to become a member. We are very happy to hear from you if you're interested to join, and you can also find more information in the chat. Moreover, I would like to draw your attention to our newly established NDC help desk for the cooling sector. The NDC help desk is your resource expert guidance in the field of green cooling, and it's really a way to directly ask questions. And the mission of the help desk is basically to assist policymakers in designing and implementing ambitious NDCs in the cooling sector. And yeah, as I said, it includes a contact form, but also the most frequently asked questions regarding NDCs in the cooling sector and a variety of publications. You can find the link in the chat, and we would be very happy to receive your questions. And with that, in the name of GIZ Proklima and the speakers, I would like to thank you all for your participation. We hope to keep in touch and see you at the next webinar. We will share all the information soon on the NDC4 website, on the Green Cooling Initiative website. And yeah, thanks again. Take care and goodbye. See you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.